Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today we're going to talk about peaches. So we just recently got a couple of flats of peaches like we do every year from a produce stand not too far from here. And I wanted to show you what some of the things I like to do with all these peaches when we get them. Now we can grow peaches here in Western Washington, but they just don't do as good as in Eastern Washington where I grew up. Now there, at one time we lived in a place where we had a couple of peach trees. And what Mom liked to do was she liked to cut them up and freeze them. The nice thing about freezing is it really does preserve the flavor. Now let me talk first a bit about how I like to can my peaches. I go with the raw pack method. There's also the hot pack method. They both have their benefits and it depends on what is important to you. To me, time is important, and not having to cook my food more than I need to is what's important. If appearance is more important and how much you can shove into your jar is important, then you're going to want to go with the hot pack method. For me, I use the raw pack. And what that means is I just take my fruit, I cut it up, I peel it, I cut it, I put it directly into my jars. And then what I do is I make a very simple syrup with just a little bit of sugar and some water. I use at the most 1 cup of sugar to 4 cups of water. I try to keep it as low as possible. I am guessing a person could go even lower than that and possibly not even add sugar. The sugar is going to help preserve the flavor and the color better in the peaches, so that's something to consider. And it does just make a nice little treat if you're wanting them as a dessert, and they're still going to have a lot less sugar than any kind of conventional dessert you're going to have. And that's what Mr. Rain likes to do with the canned peaches. I also like using the canned peaches for making creamsicles and stuff like that, but I also make them fresh, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So then once I have my jars filled, I'll go ahead and with the peaches, I go ahead and top them off with my simple syrup, which I only cook just long enough to dissolve the sugar into the water, and then I just pour it over there. You also want to make sure, and this will go whether you hot pack or raw pack, that you take either a long thin spatula of some sort, rubber spatula, silicone spatula, and you go around in there and debubble it. I like to use a long chopstick and just kind of poke it around in there and trying to get all the bubbles out. That's really an important step. Sometimes when I first started canning, I often would forget that, and you just end up having all kinds of different issues when you do that. And you'll lose maybe even a lot of your liquid in the process if you don't get those bubbles out of there. Now, what is the benefit of a hot pack? Well, one benefit is that you won't end up with this. When you cook your fruit first and then can it, it's going to fill up the whole jar, and you'll be able to get more fruit in there at a time. And so that then, because what happens is when it's canning, the fruit in the jar will shrink, and then it will tend to want to float to the top. Now to me, that's not an issue. I'm not putting my jars into competitions to win some kind of blue ribbon, and if you're doing that, you may want to hot pack. To me, it's not important. What's important is saving my time and getting the fruit preserved as quickly as I can. And so that's how I do it. Now, the other reason I like to go with the raw pack method is I am trying to do several things at once while I'm doing that. So it can take me a while to get all my jars filled, because as I'm peeling my peaches, I'm also taking the peach peels and doing other things with them. Now, a lot of people, what they like to do to get as much fruit out of their peaches, they will scald them first and then just slip the peels off so they're getting just the peel and none of the fruit coming off. But for me, this is quicker and I'm making the most of the fruit. I like to slice the peaches up, then I take a knife and I cut off the peels, intentionally leaving a fairly thick layer of fruit on the peaches. And then I will use some of them for making peach scrap vinegar like I've got going on here, and I also throw the pits into this when I do this. And I know a lot of people kind of freak out about pits when it comes to peaches and apple seeds and things like that. They worry about the cyanide because, well, and rightfully so, because there was a lot of big hullabaloo going on about the cyanide in the pits of fruits and how that's toxic, and we know cyanide is toxic, but you have to remember, it is in such a small amount and it's in its natural form. You would have to eat a lot of peach kernels and a lot of apple seeds for it to have any detrimental effect on your health. In fact, there's so much health benefits in the peach pits, in the kernel, and in those apple seeds and whatever else, that having one now and then is certainly going to help with your health. In fact, whenever I have a peach where the pit breaks open, as long as it's not rotten on the inside, I will actually eat the kernel, and I did that here. It has a slightly bitter taste, but it's somewhat more similar to the flavor of an almond with just that little bit of bitterness, and it's really good for your health. So I just don't recommend eating them by the handfuls, but who does that? As long as you're eating your kernel along with the rest of the fruit, just like if you eat the whole apple seeds and all, you're eating it all together, there's no possible way you're going to get too much of the natural form of cyanide that's in those seeds and pits. So don't worry about adding those pits to your vinegars or whatever it is you're going to use. It's not going to have a detrimental effect on your health in this form. It should be quite good for you. So that's what I've got going on here. I have 4 half gallons of peach vinegar started from the peels and the pits. Another thing I did with a few of the peels and the pits is I put them in this jar right here with some rainwater and set it in the sun to make basically a peach sun tea or a flavored water. I did just do a video about making your own flavored vitamin water, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. And here's just another idea of how you can make some. Okay, now the other thing I like to do with the peach peels, and another reason why I like to cut them rather thick, I lay them on my dehydrator trays and then I sprinkle a little bit of coconut sugar across them, and then I dehydrate them for a full day at about 125 to 135. And then I take those dehydrated peels and put them in pint-sized mason jars with a wide mouth. I prefer that for this kind of thing, and vacuum seal them in there, and now I have some treats to snack on through the year. So that's one thing you can do with the peels, and another reason why I like to peel my peaches that way. And to me it's just quicker, and I don't have to worry about the whole scalding and that big mess. It's just this way works for me much faster. Now another thing I've got going here is I got started a fermented peach smoothie. So it's already pretty bubbly, but I'm going to let it sit for a couple more days because I just started this one yesterday. And so in a couple days this will be ready, and it will be just a really yummy, fizzy, wonderful, probiotic, full fruit drink. And of course I did add some sugar to this because it is fermenting. There, we just released some of the gases out of there, and so it's going to need it. There is plenty of sugar in the peaches, but I also want to make sure there's plenty to keep it going for the next 3 days and really get a good ferment on that. Now the other thing that you can do with your peaches, and I mentioned, was making some homemade popsicles. Now I have several videos out there on how to make your homemade popsicles, and I'll go ahead and link to one of them right up here. But basically you can take your fresh fruit, you can take your canned fruit, you throw it in your blender, you add a lot of times I'll just add the whole goat milk that we get from our friend, or sometimes, like I'm going to do here, is I'm thawing out some heavy whipping cream. When I find the Organic Valley whipping cream on sale, I'll buy a bunch of them and throw them in the freezer. And this is a good way to put it to use, is for making a creamsicle. So a peaches and creamsicle, yum, so good. And my favorite molds to use for these are these ones right here. This is just the sleeve and the stick, but then it sits down into a holder, and you just stick it in your freezer. I'll go ahead and link to these below. They're in sets of 6. I have 2 sets and really like these. Another option, and I do this a lot, let's say I made way more than I meant to, and I already filled up all 6 of my popsicle holders, then I just put them in these small pint-size or half-pint mason jars like this, and then let it sit in the freezer and until, you know, Mr. Rain doesn't mind if his gets completely hard. I like mine to be just still have a little bit of softness, and then we just eat it like an ice treat with a spoon. It's super, super good. So that's what I plan on doing with most of this, is actually putting it in little glasses to eat with a spoon, which most of the time I actually prefer over eating the popsicle myself. So it's all a matter of choice, but if you already have some pint-sized mason jars, it doesn't have to be this shape. I just tend to like the shorter, stockier ones for this kind of thing. But you could even use the skinnier ones, whatever you've got, but I suggest a mason jar, and whatever you do, don't put a lid on it while it's freezing. Just set it in there, let it freeze for the day, and then that night after dinner, you've got a nice tasty treat. Now the other thing, which is probably pretty obvious, that you can do with your peaches is you can make some jams and some syrups. Now I have a video I did right up here about making pectin-free jams, why I don't use pectin anymore. But peaches are one of those that are low pectin. Well, so I just, if I shoot for making a jam with it and it turns out great, but if not, I am pleased as punch to have a peach syrup to go on our pancakes and in my homemade yogurt, or even on some ice cream on those few times that we splurge on that. And it's so good. So peach rhubarb syrup is what I plan on making within the next couple days with the peaches I have left after doing all of this. Another option you can consider for dehydrating is just to process up your peaches like I did for making this. Just put it in the blender, process it up, and pour it onto a fruit roll-up tray for your dehydrator and make some yummy fruit roll-ups. I would still recommend adding a little bit of coconut sugar to it, just because the coconut sugar, which is another reason why I like to add it to the peach peels, is just going to add some more minerals and just a little bit more flavor. I personally really like it when doing stuff like that. And it really doesn't add that much more sweetness. Coconut sugar is very unsweet compared to your organic cane sugar. And now what I would like you to do is to chime in and share with us, what do you do with your peaches when you get, whether it be from your own tree or from, like us, you went and bought them at a fruit stand, because our peach trees don't produce a lot here. What do you do with all your excess? Do you can it? Do you make jams and syrups? Do you dehydrate? Do you ferment it? Or do you make vinegar? Or do you do something completely different that we haven't even thought of? So please go ahead and share your thoughts with us and what you like to do. If nothing else, it's always fun to find places that we agree, but also to learn, oh wow, there's something I never tried before. So the next time we get peaches, we can try that. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new, and that you'll learn more from the people that comment down below. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.